Well, that theme music can only mean one thing, and that is we are here in conversation with the one and only Danielle Earl.
Hey, what an intro.
Indeed. Goodness, that only took about 8 attempts. How are things?
Well, technical difficulties.
Apparently, we're both pretty good with DSLR cameras. We're just not really good at this whole Zoom thing. So,
Very challenging.
indeed, hard to build an audience when you're working with professionals like us. But here
I
we are.
mean, we're truly thriving.
Indeed. Good to see you. How are things?
They're pretty good. How about you?
Not too bad.
It's
Things are a little odd in that we're spending an awful lot of time in self-isolation, I guess, as
Yeah.
evidenced by our beautiful surroundings, me in my kitchen and you on your couch. But
It's
this
a
is
beautiful
what
couch.
this is what the fandom wants to see, right?
I mean, depends.
The unvarnished truth. So here we are. I thought it would be kind of cool to have a little conversation about you as a photographer, as a figure skating photographer, about our experience at the Olympics, and I don't know, maybe swap a few stories, but also record the conversation in order to be able to share it with some folks who might be interested in learning more about you and how you got to where you are, and hearing about our time in PyeongChang, among other things. And who knows, maybe even seeing some photos that you'd like to share, highlights from the games. And yeah, so here we are. As you can tell, completely unscripted, but happy to have this opportunity. Thanks so much for agreeing to have this conversation.
Well, thank you for asking me. I thought it would be fun. Not too much else going on, so I figured we could have a nice chat, catch up.
Here we are. So the last time we actually saw each other was at Nationals a few months ago in Mississauga, and I don't know about you, but I was certainly excited to shoot the Worlds in Montreal. Thought it would be fun to hang out with you, of course, and to photograph another incredible figure skating event, but unfortunately it was canceled, and so we don't have those photos or stories to share. But we don't have to go that, no, we don't have to go that far back in time though to reminisce. It's only been 2 years since the Olympics, although so much has gone on since then. This is really the first chance I've had in a while to give it much thought. So before we get into talking about the Olympics, though, I'd really like to find out more about how you got your start as a photographer and how you ended up being sort of a go-to photographer in the world of figure skating. So maybe you can give us a little bit of background on how old you were when you started, how you got your start, and how you ended up being rinkside for the last Winter Olympics.
Well, I don't know how. It just still seems like a miracle. I was 14 when I started. Well, around 14. I can't be sure. And I kind of started as a way to transition out of actually skating myself. I was a skater, not a good one. If you hear any meowing, it's my cat.
Good to know.
He's hanging out. So I was a skater, not a very good one, but I had an injury when I was, I don't know, maybe like 17, 18. Then I couldn't really skate very much anymore. So I kind of used photography as a way to like stay within the sport, but not actually do it myself. And I started photography when I was 14-ish. My mom had gotten a camera, and it was, and I really wanted to try it. And she said no. So when my friend had a pairs tryout at our home rink, I was like, this is the perfect opportunity for me to use my mom's camera. So I asked her and she said yes. And I took pictures of my friend's pair tryout. And then I just kind of got addicted, I guess.
Wow. So it happened fast. You took a few photos of friends at a tryout, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're at the Olympics.
Exactly. That's the exact timeline, honestly. Nothing in between. Absolutely zero things.
I suspect there were a few steps in between.
Too.
What was the progression like? So you were 14 when you started. I'm not going to ask you your age now, but it wasn't that long ago. So tell me, how did you go from taking photos with your mom's camera to doing what you do?
it's a bit of a long and winding road, so I'll cut it down. um, in 2009-ish, I decided I really liked um, taking photos, and there was a vendor photographer in our section
Hmm.
who I wanted to work for. So I applied, and he accepted me, and then I worked for him for several years, and then I graduated high school, and I enrolled in photography, like a photography program at college,
Okay.
and thinking that it would help me like start a business one day. Um, and then about like near the end of the first semester, I got a Facebook message from this guy who had been offered a contract in a different section in Ontario, and he couldn't accept it. So he was asking me if I would be interested in taking it. And that was around, I think, I would say 2012, 2013.
Okay.
And, um, and of course, it's not an opportunity that really comes up very often. Usually, I think the photographer I was working for had like a 7-year contract, so it's not like very often that comes around. So I couldn't really pass up the opportunity if it's something that I wanted to do. So I
Hmm.
ended up saying yes, and I didn't go back to college. And then I just started as a vendor photographer. And when I was pretty young, um, I reached out to Golden Skate, the website,
Okay.
to see if they needed a photographer, because I wanted to go to nationals and like Skate Canada International and like international events.
Right.
And I also didn't really know what I was doing. um, so I just reached out, and she said she would grant me accreditation, which was, I mean, my dream come true. Or
Right.
not grant me, but she would write the letter to like,
Apply for accreditation. Sure.
that's the word.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of, you know, kept on working, and here we are. That's
Wow.
that's right.
So,
The abridged version.
fair enough. Fair enough. So, obviously, a lot of time spent practicing, honing your craft. And at what point
Yes,
did you decide that you were confident enough or established enough to start your own business? Because that's a pretty major
big step.
step.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I was 16 or 17. I think maybe a little older than that, actually, 17, 18.
Okay.
I was, um, I had asked for a raise, and my employer couldn't offer that, which is totally fine, and I get it. So I kind of decided, like, that's okay, like, you do you, that's your business choice. And I think I'm gonna try and like pursue like my own thing. I
Right.
started doing a little bit of independent competitions. Like
Hmm.
me and another photographer um, went to events together, and we weren't under any specific company name. And I also did like, I was at the time still in high school, so I was doing like yearbook stuff and other sports like football and whatever,
Yeah.
with my yearbook class and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think I really like decided to make it like a career when I was, well, it was in 2012. I know it was like March 24th, 2012. Still have it like written in my brain, was
Wow.
when I registered Danielle Earl Photography as a business.
Wow. And no one else had that business name, so you lucked in.
Strange, I know. It's a very common name.
Cool. So, fast forward then to 2018, and tell me about your reaction when you found out that you were accredited to go to the Olympics.
Well, I immediately cried. I texted my mom. Oh, there's my cat. I texted my mom because she was and it was a competition weekend because it was February. So I was at one competition, she was at another competition. She does the desk for me.
Okay.
And I texted her, and she told all the other moms. And so basically I just like mostly cried when I
Very
found
exciting. Very exciting. So, um, you were there shooting for Golden Skate,
it. Yep,
correct?
that's correct.
Excellent. And as it happens, I was there shooting for Skate Canada and Speed
Hmm.
Skating Canada. So we had the chance to not only um, share in that experience, I guess, ahead of time, because we both shot the nationals at in Vancouver, I guess,
Hmm.
in the lead up to the games. And then, as it happens, we were both on the same flight to Korea, which I don't think we had planned.
No.
But what was going through your mind in the days and hours leading up to the trip to Korea?
Ooh, I was nervous, very nervous. Um, I was excited, and I didn't really know what to expect, so I was like trying to plan for a whole bunch of different scenarios.
Right.
I when we arrived, I was so scared I was gonna get lost, and I was so grateful that you were on the plane because I was like, thank God, because if Greg is there, we can get lost together. It'll be fine. Somebody will rescue us.
Right.
So, but yeah, mostly just excited and nervous. How about you?
Probably the same, it really sinks in when you're getting on a plane for a 15 or 16-hour flight. And we happen to have some other Olympians or people we knew on the flight. And so that's when, for me, it became real, knowing that, all the work we had put into getting there, both in terms of photography skills, but also the actual logistics required. Um, Being on that flight was really the first time I kind of had to look around and realized, oh my goodness, this is actually happening. So I hear you. The nerves kick in a little bit. You start to feel the pressure. You know that you have a job to do, but also pure excitement, right? You're doing
Yeah.
something just so unique, and it was a really fun energy. So when we made it to Korea, you and I went through the process of getting our accreditation and sort of figuring out our way around. Um,
Hmm.
but we had to get our act together pretty quick. We were both staying in the media village, and we were literally a day or two out from the beginning of the game. So there really wasn't a lot of time to sort of get used to our surroundings. It was pretty much go from the moment we stepped off the plane until I guess until the flame went out 17 or 18 days later. It was one,
Yep. It
it was
really
one
was.
incredible 2.5 week experience. So I'm sure many people are interested in hearing about some of the highlights, some of the things you enjoyed most, but of course, seeing some of your photos as well. So perhaps you can share with us some of the photos that you're either most proud of, or photos that bring back really fun memories from your time at the Olympics.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe I'll start with like a classic one. Let me see if I can get this screen sharing thing going here. Can you see it?
I can.
Beautiful. Oh, did I mess up? No, I didn't. Okay.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Of course, there's this one.
Of Team Canada entering the stadium.
Yes, I'm sure you have a similar one that
Well, the reason I would have a
means a
similar
lot to
one
you
is
as
because
well.
we were literally seated side by side. But
Yeah, I
again, one
think
of
I have
those
a.
moments when we see Scott and Tess as flag bearers, Patrick right in behind there. So to see the entire team being led in by some of our most accomplished and decorated figure skaters was
Athletes.
pretty cool.
Yeah, I always like to play like spot the skater or spot the athlete that you know
Yeah.
in this crowd. I can always pick out Andrew and Eric
Ah, yes.
and
Well,
Piper.
they figured very prominently. What's interesting about this is that the team competition actually started the same day. So earlier that day, many of those athletes were already in the process of competing before the opening ceremonies, and
Yeah,
so it was quite remarkable that they were able to compete in the morning and then march in the parade that evening, because the venues were not close, and obviously when you're an athlete competing, you have to prepare accordingly. So that was fun.
absolutely. Actually, I have a fun picture that I'm going to share with you right now that you may recall of us waiting for the ceremonies to start. It makes me smile.
Ah, there we are. Yes,
Yes.
well, a reminder to everyone that it was an outdoor ceremony. So we were in a
Yeah.
stadium. but it was at the base of the mountains and quite windy that night, as I recall, and probably about minus 20 or so.
Oh, so cold.
It was very cold. To be honest, I wasn't so much concerned about my equipment not working properly as I was about not being able to feel my fingers because
Mm-hmm.
as a photographer, it's pretty important to have the use of your hands. And so even even with gloves on, it was a pretty chilly experience. But yeah, that's a cool shot. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and we ended up, I think we waited for like 7 hours before it started because they like warn you that you can't just like hang around. You can't just like show up last minute.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, of course, security being very very much present at these events, plus the fact that there's a whole protocol that you have to follow between the time that you get there and the time that the event actually starts, usually several hours later. And of course, being outside, it felt even longer. But what a cool experience that was.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And yeah, so competition's underway. You're largely spending your time in an arena, as you often would, I
Yeah.
suppose, as a figure skating photographer. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, because I was there just for figure skating, and
There we are.
that's where I was. And Greg was there to do both figure skating for Skate Canada and speed skating, long and short track.
Indeed.
So Greg had a very extensive job to do.
Two different arenas, side by side, mind you, but I had to go through security
Not
each time I
that close.
exited and entered. So yeah, I got my steps in, that's for sure. And of course, they must have known you were coming because they had it decorated in your favorite color.
Yes, I submitted my request early.
Oh. So tell me about your time then at the Gangneung Ice Arena.
Well, I spent 90% of my time there, I think. It was great that the practice rink was downstairs underneath the main competition rink, so that was really
Right.
great. And also, it was nice because there was a little bit more access. Like you could get, I'm going to share, you could get a little bit closer to like the skater on off door, because
Right.
in
Mm-hmm.
the main rink, you could only go to field of play, which is ice level, if you had a special armband,
Right.
but it was a little bit less strict in the practice rink. So I
Yeah.
really liked that.
Something about getting candid shots too, or those sort of unguarded moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether it's skaters interacting with their coaches or I know, for instance, you had pictures of Scott and Tessa practicing and they're wearing different outfits than they did during the competition.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I
that's
don't think
kind
I
of neat.
pulled any of those.
That's sort of a neat perspective as well, right? Because we're, when you think of Moulin Rouge, for instance, you picture the iconic red dress. And if I recall correctly, when they practiced, she was wearing a blue dress. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So,
That's
so
my favorite dress.
yeah. So just experiences like that, which are pretty unique, being at the practice rink, and as you mentioned, um, having that access or being able to watch it and not be as constrained in terms of where you can shoot from and what you can shoot, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Certainly, I don't have a photo of it to share, but when it came time to actually shooting the events, um, there were a surprising number of Canadian photographers there, I suppose, largely
Yeah.
because our figure skating team was so strong. And naturally, any Canadian media that was in Korea wanted to cover that event. But there was something kind of daunting about being surrounded by so many remarkable photographers, not just Canadian, but
Oh,
photographers from around the world. And again, that's when you feel as though this is a really big deal, right? It's not just like
yeah.
any other skating competition or sporting competition. This is the big leagues, right?
Yeah,
And
you saying that reminds me of a story. It's so quick one, I promise. I've I had to eat a little bit of humble pie at the Olympics for the Paris free skate. I was on field of play, which is like super rare.
yeah,
So I was ice level, and once you're on field of play, you can't get off until the event is done, or they're doing, I think, a flood, if I
okay,
recall.
yeah,
And it was during Aliona and Bruno, so the
Mhm.
Olympic champions free skate, my shutter blew.
Oh no,
Yeah. So
that's
I was
not
like
good at
full
all.
panic. We still had Sui and Han and Megan and Eric.
Okay.
And I was looking around and I was like, who shoots Nikon? Because everyone at the Olympics shoots Canon. And I was like, so who shoots Nikon that I can like beg, borrow, or steal a camera body from? And I
Right.
was so lucky that Paul Chasson was at ice level
Right.
and
Right.
he
And
shoots Nikon or shot Nikon.
this is probably his 20th Olympics at that point.
Yeah, he's got cameras. And I was an idiot and didn't bring a backup body, like a brand new person to photography.
Oh my goodness.
So I was like, I can't not take pictures of the podium pairs. Like these people are gonna like the next two teams are probably gonna be on the
Right.
podium.
Right.
So Leon and Bruno finished. Thankfully, it went out at like the very end of their skate. I say thankfully, but I'm not actually that thankful. Um, and I ran over to Paul and I was like, Paul, I'm so sorry. I know this is so unprofessional. I will owe you my entire life. But is there any way that I can borrow a backup body from for like the last three pairs? And he was like, fine, which is like totally fair reaction. But he let me, and I, to this day, I like every time I see him, I'm like, you saved my life. You have no idea. But it just reminded me like how high stress it actually was like during the event. And when
Yeah,
you were
for
saying
sure.
about the other Canadian photographers, I was like so thankful that Paul was on field of play with me that day, because I don't think if it was anybody else, I don't think they would have been like as willing to help
So
me
for the
out.
rest of the games,
Totally
then, were
fine.
you still only shooting with one camera, or how did that work?
No, so the main press center has had the Nikon and Canon
Right.
um,
CPS and NPS. Yeah,
workshops or
they have
whatever.
booth.
So
Yeah.
so
So
I
they
borrowed.
benefited.
They helped me out big time.
Good.
The Nikon guys. They loaned me a body and then they put a new shutter in my camera. The next day I picked it up. It was wild. I wish that was at every event.
Well, you mentioned field of play. Obviously, when there are that many photographers, only a very limited number get to be close to the ice. I seem
Mhm.
to recall that you and I were up in the rafters on the first day and wondering or hoping that we wouldn't be stuck there for the duration of the games. But of course,
And
it's all based on who you're shooting for, and furthermore, demand. And it just so happens that
mhm.
figure skating events and short track events are both extremely popular, and those
Mhm.
required tickets in addition to the accreditation. So it wasn't simply a matter of showing up. You had to actually be prioritized, I guess, or put on a list in order to be considered for
Tickets,
an
yeah.
on ice or a field of play position, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Or
share a
even
couple
just
shots
tickets.
from my figure skating debut at the Olympics. Well, not me, of course, shooting
You
figure
didn't
skating.
compete?
Sadly, well, no, not sadly. I did not.
Opportunity.
Thank goodness. Um, that might have been the cause of your shutter blowing, if that was the case. Um, let me see if I can share a photo here. Um, this is one that I'm sure you've seen me post before.
Yes, I love it. And I remember when you got it printed.
Thank you. Yes, you were instrumental in that. Yeah, this was the team competition, and I had the opportunity to shoot them at ice level during the ice dance competition as well. But what really sticks out to me about this photo, or what I like best about it, is just that it sort of represented the culmination of years of effort, certainly on the part of the skaters, in this case
Yeah,
Tessa and Scott, but
of course.
also the journey that I took to get to the games as well, which, having seen them practice and had a glimpse of the work that they were putting into this performance and this competition, to see them realize their dream right before my eyes, and to be able to capture that was a really cool
Something
and
special.
yeah, a really unique experience, right? And one that
Yeah.
I'll never forget. So I was especially pleased that when they did their final pose, it just so happened to be framed by the rings, and you know, it really did sort of uh, capture that moment, which I'm quite pleased about. Um,
Yeah, that's an awesome picture.
What were some of the other
in my
highlights? So,
case.
so we've talked about, um, getting to the Olympics, some of the challenges once you're there, the stresses that you feel. Were there any surprises? Anything that you weren't expecting, or that you know, when you look back on it now, 2 years later, still stands out in your mind as something really, really special?
Oh, I mean, there's so many things. I think the opening ceremony is, of course, so special. For me, I think I have two like moments of the games for me.
Hmm.
One of them, of course, is Tessa and Scott's gold, but also Caitlin Osmond's bronze.
Right.
That to me was like, I don't know, like I guess I wasn't expecting it, and I just like she landed her second last jump, and I was in my head I was up in the rafters because I spent most of my time up in the rafters at the Olympics, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stand because it's a standing position. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to stand through the rest of this program. I am so excited. My legs were shaking. I was like, she's going to win a medal. I'm going to lose my mind. But it was really one of my moments of the games. And then I think my other moment, and I'm gonna pull up a picture that like came after the moment, but it was
Uh,
going up to the mountain cluster for the medal ceremony for the ice dance medals.
that's terrific.
Um, but it was like this moment, of course, like the it was just like amazing. But wait, waiting in the wings for this medal ceremony to occur. The medal ceremony before, I think, was really special. It was the 2-man bobsleigh,
Right.
and Canada tied with Germany, I believe,
Yes.
for first place. And the 4 guys, when they were announced as like Olympic champions, they all held hands and stepped up onto that podium. And I was like, oh, this is the moment for me of the Olympics. Like, this is like countries putting aside like, their nationality and just like celebrating
Right.
their accomplishments and their hard work and all that, like years and years of training that goes into that. And I was like, man, this is something like really special, and I'm really, really glad that I got to witness it, because this was the only medal ceremony that I got to go to.
Yeah, well, as it happens, I had the opportunity to shoot a few different medal ceremonies because our Canadian skaters, both figure skaters and speed skaters, did really well. But again, this was an outdoor venue, and so and it was nowhere close to where we were shooting the events. It usually
Not
required
even a
taking at
little bit
least one.
close. It
No,
was so far.
it usually required taking a shuttle for at least an hour and maybe longer, and then once you got there you had to wait your turn because only a very limited number of people were allowed in the moat or the pit area in front of the stage. um, and again, being outdoors, being in the mountains, it was very cold, but you know what, nothing warms your
Yeah.
heart and your body more than hearing your anthem. And we were really
Oh
fortunate
yeah.
to have so many Canadian athletes win gold. I have a similar shot, although mine comes from the team event. If I can find it here, I'll share it. And in this case, because it was a team event, I had to stand a little further back in order to capture the whole group. So here we are.
Ah, yes.
I love how Megan looks
Oh,
like she's floating. Meanwhile,
Patrick's face is so great.
Patrick looks like he's about to fall right off the podium.
I think he was. Oh, that's such a great picture. That's
So
fun.
what's kind of interesting about the photo, I guess, in my mind, is that between me and them are 3,000 people. um,
Oh, so you were on like the
I had
risers back
I
there.
was on a riser very much at the back of the plaza in order to capture that full team, because from where I was standing in the moat, it would have been, maybe individual shots as opposed to a full group shot. So I certainly didn't want to miss that moment, and I'm really
Yeah.
pleased with just the look of pure joy and how each of the skaters is sort of celebrating it in their own way. And as I say, Megan looks like she's about to take off, so that's pretty funny.
I'm sure they were as excited enough to take off.
Indeed.
It's only the beginning. Actually, I believe that was my birthday.
Yes, you got to celebrate your birthday at the Olympics.
I
And
did.
I don't recall there being a birthday cake, but what I do recall is that someone had the wherewithal to bring you a McFlurry from
Could it
the,
have been you?
yes, yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Oh, wow. From the on-site McDonald's?
Um, you spent the bulk of your time, I guess, at the rink. I did as well, or between two rinks, really. But we did have the occasion to visit a couple of other well, not little venues. We had a little bit of time to visit
Mhm.
a handful of other venues, and one of those was the sliding center, which was super cool. We had
That
a
was such a
chance.
fun day.
We had a chance to watch some skeleton athletes practice. Ridiculously fun to watch and cool and hard to photograph, frankly.
Oh,
But I think
yeah.
the biggest challenge that day was making it to the top of the track. I remember getting there. We decided to check it out. We were very excited at the prospect of seeing some sliding, and all of a sudden, that excitement turned to dread when we realized that to make it to the very top, we'd have to walk like 3 kilometers or something.
Like in
Ridiculous.
a almost like this incline, like a steep incline.
Yes, yeah, it was very much a mountain that we were about to climb
Yeah.
until some volunteer on his way past in a truck took pity on us and offered us a ride. And thank goodness he did, because again, I
We
don't think
had no idea what we were starting to get into. We were
no,
like huffing and puffing and we were like 5 steps up.
I don't think we had any sense of how difficult the trek would be until we were
Yeah.
actually making our way back down the track and realized, and that took probably half an hour or more.
Yeah, and also it was so steep coming down. Like
Yes,
at parts you had to like, and there was so much like salt to like melt the snow or whatever, the ice. So and like there was points where you just like slid down.
in other words, it was not for the faint at heart, and probably easier,
Definitely
if
safe.
not easier, then definitely faster if you were on a luge or a bobsleigh, which we were not.
Absolutely. No.
But you were kind enough to take a really cool photo that I absolutely love. Hang on, let's see. I'm starting to get the hang of this whole share screen thing.
We're
So,
getting there.
so this is a photo that you took of me taking a photo
Yeah.
of an athlete on the track, and beautiful composition with the PyeongChang logo in the ring.
Thank you.
And for some reason, I'm wearing a Canada ski cross jacket, so that totally fits.
Which you definitely took pictures of ski cross.
The
Actually,
one thing that is hard to emphasize or notice in this photo is just how ridiculously fast that slider went past us.
oh, you had
Probably
to
in the
like,
neighborhood of about 120 to 130 kilometers an hour, which is
yeah.
lightning quick. So
And really to
good
get
job on
any
keeping us
pictures,
focused.
well, to get any pictures, you kind of had to listen to them coming down the track.
It's true.
And there was a person on the announcements telling you which turn they were going to, like which
Yes.
turns they were at. So
Yes.
you had to kind of be like, okay, I'm going to turn 23 or whatever it was. And you can hear them coming and you had to like frame your shot. And then once you saw them out of the corner of your eye, just like hold it down and pray to God.
Absolutely.
Because
Well, certainly,
you
yeah. If
like
you waited to
can't
see
see
them, they
them.
were already gone, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I had actually, it's funny because I pulled one that was the similar but different. I think I just spent the whole day taking pictures of you taking pictures. But this is one I had pulled of you, and I had thought it was a Canadian slider, but I don't think it is upon like looking a little deeper. But anyway, I thought it was cool too, like a little
Yeah, I
different
was I
angle.
was right up close with my fisheye trying to get the that curved view, and yeah, there you have it.
And this is
Again,
at
the beauty of it is because it was a training session and not the event itself. We basically had the track to ourselves, and so uh,
yeah.
that would explain why we
Oh,
were able to get so close and no one else appears in the photos.
yeah, it was cool. And also another like highlight of that day was that we got to talk to some of the sliding coaches,
Ah, yes, I
which
remember
is
that.
really cool. And you were like so disappointed because you had forgotten your pins to trade, and they were like, we're not trading pins unless you have pins to trade.
That's
We were
right.
like,
I
dang
don't think
it.
most people understand what a hot commodity pins are at the Olympics. If you've
Yeah.
never been, it will blow your mind. There are people who literally go to the Olympics just to trade pins. And
Yeah, and their whole like accreditation band is full.
for sure, for sure. People have
People are
blankets
just
full of
giving them
pins
out
that they
willy-nilly.
display. Yeah. So, given that I had been to the Vancouver Olympics in 2010, I had some knowledge of the pin trading that went on, and so I came prepared. But of course, on that particular day, I had left my bag of pins at the media village, and so I wasn't able to trade with the Australian coaches that were there at the sliding center. So, oh well.
Well,
Life,
hopefully, if we get to go back, touch wood,
that's it.
um,
Never
we will
leave home
both be
without
more
pins,
prepared on the pin front.
for
Because I
sure.
had no idea about the pins. I was like, pins? What are Greg? Why do you have so many pins?
And
But it turns
then,
out
and then you figured
they
it
were
out.
useful.
It's true. Um, we should probably wrap things up because I'm guessing most people will have grown tired of hearing our
Weary.
voices. But before we go, any other photos that you'd like to share, highlights or moments that you captured that encapsulate that Olympic experience?
Oh, I think maybe. Oh, I loved since I was talking about it earlier, the moment that Caitlin found out that she had won a medal. It's kind of like one of my favorite. I know it's so far away, but I really like it. Just brings like your picture of Tessa and Scott. It really brings back like all the memories of that day and that moment, and
Yeah,
it's really like
the sheer emotion.
yeah. It just really reminds me. I was like shaking like a leaf for whatever reason. I see a lot of skating, so I don't typically get too excited, but this is just something else. I think like the Olympics is a different ball game altogether.
Well, and it's fascinating because I think, first of all, as a photographer, as a sports photographer, you are expected to check your emotions at the door, right? I
Yeah,
mean, you're there
actually,
doing a job, and
basically.
your job is to capture captivating images, I guess, or compelling images, and that requires focus, literally and figuratively. You need to be on your game because these are moments that will never be repeated. And whether it's moments of triumph or moments of defeat, if you're wrapped up in that moment, it's very hard to ensure that the photos that you're taking and are, you know, of a high quality, I guess, or that you're not missing things as you go. Um,
Yeah.
I had a similar experience, frankly, in shooting the final of the ice dance competition. You know, you're
Hmm.
watching it, and your mind is sort of on two things at once: doing the job that you're there to do, but also getting completely transfixed by what you're seeing. And
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
that that only that emotional that what am I trying to say? That emotional experience is only amplified by the fact that if you have a connection with those skaters or those athletes, it's hard not to get wrapped up in it, right? You've described, you know, what it felt like to watch Caitlin win an Olympic medal, and I'm not sure it would have meant as much to you if you didn't have a well. In fact, I'm sure it wouldn't have meant as much to you had you not had a pre-existing relationship or connection with Caitlin. And by that I mean not just knowing her as a person, but watching her develop as a skater and knowing the path she took to get to where she was.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
it's a really
It's
special connection and something that if this was your first time shooting figure skating, or maybe it was a skater you were less familiar with, yeah, it would be a really cool moment, but it wouldn't necessarily bring goosebumps the way it did and the way it still does when you think about it now.
yeah, for sure. And I always I always think about um the skaters that I'm photographing now or that are like just turning senior this year or next
Right.
year or last year, whatever. and how like some of them maybe might go to the Olympics one day,
Sure.
and I've been photographing them since they were like just starting in the sport, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know how I'm gonna gonna make it through watching them, let alone if I'm lucky enough to be there.
Yeah.
Like it's very interesting. So
It's really
it's a great
special.
privilege. It's a
Yeah, for
privilege
sure.
really to get to watch these skaters like grow through the sport. Really, it's really
I think,
special.
for sure, you're invested in it, and you know what? I think that also helps. Um, on the one hand, it's a challenge, as we've discussed, to kind of keep your emotions in check. But
Oh yeah, for sure.
when you nail it, when you get that image,
Hmm.
it's the culmination of all of the endless hours of work that the athletes have done, but also the endless hours of practice and work that you've done. And when you have that
Hmm.
synergy, and I don't want to sound all sort of, you know,
La
um,
di da.
no, I mean it really is it's a hard thing to describe to people who have not experienced it, because
Hmm.
it's kind of like hitting the perfect shot in golf, or I don't know. It's
Sinking
rare,
that
really.
sweet 3-pointer in the NBA finals.
Something like that. Yes, yes.
Look at me making sports references.
But really, it's capturing a moment that will never be repeated, or and knowing it, and being able to share that is a really special feeling, especially with the athletes, especially with their families and loved ones,
Yeah.
because they're in the moment, and we're there to capture it. And
Yeah, and I think that the gravity of that isn't lost on you when you're at the Olympics. Like it's everywhere.
for
Like,
sure.
you
Well, I
can't
mean,
forget it because the logo is everywhere. You're like, you're at the Olympics. This is never gonna be repeated. But it's like
absolutely,
really
absolutely.
special.
And it's a question of how do you embrace that energy and that pressure, and deliver. And
Mhm.
um, I'll share with you a photo. This is not a figure skater, but of a short track skater who many people will now be familiar with. May not have known her before the PyeongChang Olympics, but um,
Uh,
this is Kim Boutin, who,
I
who was
love
our
that. What a great photo.
thank you. Kim was our closing ceremony flag bearer. So
Mhm.
I was very fortunate that not only was I there shooting figure skating, and witnessing Scott and Tessa bringing in the flag in our opening ceremonies, but also witnessing Kim just totally turn into a superstar at the Olympics. She won 3 medals. She was named flag bearer, and you couldn't have picked a more deserving athlete for that honor. And this is the moment where she realized, or it had been announced, that she'd won her first Olympic medal, which was a bronze. And you know just the way the sport of short track works is that it's not necessarily the order that you finish in, if this makes any sense at all. Kim had
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
finished the race in fourth position. And so she came off the ice not thinking that she'd won a medal. In fact, probably feeling quite dejected that she had finished just off the podium. But as a result of a disqualification, another skater was penalized, and because of that, it took several minutes after the race for the announcement to be made, and she was there, and I was literally 2 or 3 feet away from her, and she's embracing her coach. So I figured, this could go one of two ways. Either there's an announcement made that Kim has just won a bronze medal and she'll be ecstatic, or the final result will be confirmed and she'll finish fourth, and maybe be sad or dejected. And
Yeah.
either way, I had to stay focused on her and only her. I wasn't
Yeah.
going to let anyone or anything around me distract me from capturing that moment. I'm so glad that I was able to, and there was no one between me and her. And so I just wanted to make sure that I kept my emotions in check, and waited for that announcement to be made almost as anxiously as she did. And then this was the result. So I'm really pleased with how that turned out.
Yeah, that's a great picture. It's,
Thanks.
I love a picture that shows a little emotion.
Well, and again, it's not a sport photo per
Yeah,
se. It's a
it's more of a
reaction.
human photo. Yeah.
Um, One other one here, while we're on the topic of jubilation and celebration. Um,
Ah.
this is Ted Jan Blomen, who is a Canadian long track skater, and this was as he had crossed the line. He sort of came around the oval and looked at the clock and realized that he had just won the gold in the men's 10,000 meters. And it just so happened, and this was sheer luck, that he appeared to look right at me as, you know, the clock was sort of over my shoulder. And so I'm quite convinced he was looking at the clock and not at my lens. But either way, just that moment of you know, relief. He's probably exhausted. The guy has just skated 10 kilometers, but
I don't know how they do that.
completely ecstatic. And again, the rings, you know, to sort of capture the moment. So there you have it.
That's another great one.
Thanks.
You really nailed it. A+ job.
Well, and so did you. And thanks again so much for sharing. I figure we should probably wrap things up, but hopefully we can do this again sometime. I'm sure for those who've been following along and watching this conversation, I'm sure they appreciated seeing some photos that they may not have seen before, and hearing about how you got your start. I'm curious, just sort of as a closing thought, what advice might you have to offer to anyone who aspires to become either a sports photographer, an Olympic photographer perhaps, or is just pursuing the art of photography in general? Anything that you would offer in terms of tips or advice for someone who's just getting started?
Well, I mean, I think I always, whenever somebody asks me for advice, I always say practice. It's like, you know how an athlete has to put in 10,000 hours to hone their craft. It's not much different. Like, I'm not as athletic, but I think you have to put your 10,000 hours in, and then you have to put another 10,000 in, and just like practice. And I also like to say that it's not about the most expensive gear, the best camera, the best lens. It's really what you're doing with that gear, and how you learn how to use your camera and set it so that it works in the lighting that you're given. And of course, there are some cameras that work better in, you know, whatever lighting conditions. But I think to start out, you don't have to be spending like thousands and thousands of dollars. You can get an entry level DSLR and just like go out and practice and talk to like, if you want to work in sports, talk to club owners or leaders and make relationships with these people, and so that it's like all above bar. No, it's not just some, you know, a person that nobody knows going into the field or rink or whatever taking photos. Like, always ask permission, practice, and don't feel like you have to spend $1 bajillion right off the bat, because if you find it's something you don't like, then you've just spent a lot of money.
Well, that's great advice, and I would say I would offer very similar advice when asked. You know, practice. You know, if you enjoy it and you truly want to pursue it, be it as a hobby or as a profession, then you owe it to yourself to get good at it, right? But that learning process doesn't ever end.
No, never.
You know,
never, ever.
I look back on photos I took even a year ago or 2 years ago and sometimes cringe, because hopefully I've improved, and you look back and it's nice to see that you've made some progress, obviously. But again, you want to be in a position where if there's a moment worth capturing, you are equipped to do exactly that.
Yep.
And whether it's knowing how to use your equipment, I don't care if you're shooting with an iPhone or a DSLR. Again, if you want to become good at something, you owe it to yourself to practice and to figure out how to do it properly. And there is a certain degree of satisfaction, as we've talked about, and a sense of accomplishment and pride when you are successful in doing that. And it's been really special to not only witness some of these really incredible accomplishments and events and achievements, but to be able to then share in that and to share your perspective of it. So yeah. There you go.
add really quickly just to end. Maybe
Oh, by all
not
means.
advice, like just to end the advice part. um, you
Got
don't
places to
have to.
be, Danielle? Come on.
No, I just sit in my house. um, I lost my train of thought. You don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on like courses to learn how to do things. Like I would say your best friend is Google and YouTube. If you have questions, like there's so much information out
Absolutely.
there. I was never classically trained in photography. I Googled every single question I had, and I watched YouTube videos if I couldn't figure it out by reading. As a visual learner, it was very helpful.
Yeah.
But I don't. The only money I ever spent on learning how to do photography was college, and I didn't actually find it very helpful. So you don't feel like you have to spend a lot of money to start. Really,
Absolutely.
that was
Absolutely.
my bottom line.
There you go. Well, thanks again so much for taking the time to chat with us, and us.
You and all your friends
me,
there in
me,
your
me in
apartment.
my empty apartment. At least you have cats. What have I got? I've got
True.
an empty fridge. This
Same.
has been fun. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to do this again. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for sharing.
And
And
if people want us to like elaborate on a certain subject, just let us know. We'll
well,
go a little deeper.
what kind of subject might that be? There
I don't
seem to have
know.
been some requests for photos of a certain ice dance
Oh
pair,
God,
but I'm
Greg,
not.
you were so prepared for that. It's like it's like you were prepared, and I just
You
was
teed it up for me,
unexpected.
Danielle. You teed it up.
I
Thanks
didn't.
so much,
Okay.
and we'll catch up again soon. All right.
Okay, sounds good.
Take care.
Bye.